The NVIDIA T600 is one of my favorite GPUs of all time, but there's a new contender in the low-profile entry-level GPU space. Is the RX 6400 XT the new king of the budget GPUs? Well, I don't know. Maybe. Let's find out! Oh hey, how you doing? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video, and subscribing, if you like the video of course. So, it's no secret that I love the T600. This GPU came along during a dark time in PC gaming, at the height of the GPU apocalypse when crypto miners and scalpers and chip shortages and predatory retailers made it nearly impossible to buy any GPU at a decent price. The T600 comes along, flying under the radar, and it was actually a GPU you could buy. And not only that, it offered good performance for the price compared to the rest of the market. It has 4 display ports, it has built-in NVENC hardware encoding, and it's single slot, low profile. And it only pulls 40 watts of power. It's not a gaming beast, but like I showed in my reviews and other videos, lots of videos actually, there's a bunch of them linked below if you want to check them out, it's actually a decent little GPU for gaming. It's not made for gaming, it's a workstation card, but it plays games good enough. Even modern titles are playable with some sacrifices. This GPU cost me $185, but there's a new kid on the block, and I'm really into this one. Do you guys know about this GPU? This is the new AMD RX 6400. I already made a video on this GPU. There's a video review linked in the description below. And spoiler alert, I really liked it. This is like the little brother to the RX 6500 XT. And like its big brother, the 6400 is a popular card to hate. Lots of people hate these GPUs, and I don't agree with most of the criticisms. Let's get that out of the way. This GPU does have some shortcomings, only 2 display outputs, no hardware encoding or AV1 decoding. Yeah, it's not going to do a good job recording your gameplay or streaming, so if you need to run 3 monitors and stream on Twitch or do video editing, then yeah, this probably isn't the GPU for you. And while it offers really good performance on PCIe 4.0 systems, it has varying performance on PCIe 3.0 systems. Most games aren't much different, but on some games you'll take a performance hit. No doubt about it. But I don't think that it's a deal breaker. You can still game on this GPU, even on PCIe 3.0, and it still performs good for the price, in my opinion. It's also low profile, single slot, and it only pulls 50 watts of power. But what we're here to find out is which of these GPUs is the better value. Which offers the most bang for the buck. The T600 cost me $185. This RX 6400 cost me $160, but now I can't find them for less than $185 in my area, which is the same price I paid for the T600. And they seem to be about the same price in other regions as well, so that's the price we're going with here. We'll assume each of these cost $185, but which one should you buy to play games with? Well, we'll need to put them head to head to find out which offers the best performance for the price. So you know what that means. It's time for another GPU SmackDown. SmackDown! In this corner, we have the GPU that saved us during the scalpocalypse, the NVIDIA T600. And in this corner, the new kid on the block, love it or hate it, it's the RX 6400. This is a battle to the death. Which low-profile budget GPU will take home the trophy? It's not a real trophy, by the way. It's a graphic. We're pretending. Who's gonna come out on top? The T600? Or will it be the 6400? Or will it be the GT710? Wait, what? You're not supposed to be here. Get the heck out of here, you piece of garbage. Okay, T600 versus RX 6400. Let's do this thing. SmackDown! SmackDown! Smacking them down, yeah. These are both going to be running in my test rig, running a Ryzen 7 5800X, 32GB of DDR4 RAM running at 3600 MHz, and my system drive is an NVMe SSD running at PCIe 4.0. Oh, and both of these GPUs will also be running at PCIe 4.0 speeds, but stick around to the end of the video because I'll do a PCIe 3.0 comparison as well. And with that out of the way, without further delay, let's play some games. Oh, by the way, all of the gameplay you see on the screen was recorded separately. I didn't record my benchmark, so the numbers weren't affected by recording at all. We're testing 5 games today: Shadow of the Tomb Raider, GTA 5, The Witcher 3, God of War, and Cyberpunk 2077. Starting off with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, why not? Running at the medium preset, 1080p native resolution without any upscaling. This is a good game to test GPUs with because it's very well optimized for both AMD and NVIDIA GPUs, and it's a relatively recent game with lots of graphics options. It runs well on capable hardware, and it's just so darn nice looking. First up, we have the T600, which averaged 42 FPS by the end of my benchmark run. Very playable and enjoyable at this FPS. At a price of $185, that means that the T600 came out with an FPS per dollar value of 0.22. But let's see how the RX 6400 did. Same game, same benchmark run with the same settings. The 6400 averaged 59 FPS. At the same price of $185, that means that the RX 6400 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.31. So an initial good showing for the 6400. It came out ahead by 40%. Wow, that's actually pretty crazy. The 6400 mopped the floor with the T600 in this first test, but we can't rely on one game test to draw conclusions, so let's see how these GPUs compare in a few other games. Here's The Witcher 3. This one I'm curious about because I actually played a ton of this game on the T600 back when I made the Optiplex build. Did you see that video? There's a link to that below if you want to check that out. But when I did that project, I ended up playing The Witcher 3 on that PC for like 3 nights in a row. And it played great. I had no complaints. So here on this test rig, running at 1080p, medium preset, the T600 got an average of 56 FPS. Yeah, that's great. This game looks great at these settings and it runs perfect. You can use this GPU to play this game on like a 1080p monitor or TV and you're not missing much. This means that the T600 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.30. So it did much better here in The Witcher 3, but how did the RX 6400 do? 72 FPS. So again, yeah, that's better. And at $185, that means the 6400 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.39, which means that the 6400 comes out ahead in value by 29%. The game is playable at these settings on both these GPUs, but this comparison is about value. FPS per dollar. And so far the RX 6400 is coming out way ahead, but let's do some more tests. Moving on to GTA 5, which is an older game and a super well optimized game. Runs great on almost anything. I tested this on both the T600 and the RX 6400 in my previous videos and it did great on both. Today we're running at 1080p, high settings. The T600 gives us an average of 81 FPS, which is really great, you know? Great to have a high FPS showing from the T600 in a very popular game. This means that the T600 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.44. This game runs well on lots of hardware though, so how does the RX 6400 do? Well, at these same settings, the 6400 gets an average FPS of 106. 106 FPS. That's an FPS per dollar value of 0.57. I mean, this is 1080p, high settings, and most GPUs can get really high frame rates in this game, but comparing these two cards in this game means that the 6400 comes out ahead by 30%. Let's move on to a newer game. God of War is pretty new. It just came out earlier this year. I actually did an entire video on the performance of this game on the T600. There's a link to that below. In my test today, I'm running at 1080p, original preset, which are the graphical settings that the game ran on the PS4. And at these settings, the T600 got an average FPS of 30. Exactly 30 FPS. So yeah, that's not ideal, but it's playable. You know, I'd probably use FSR to get a performance boost. That's what I did in my tests before, and it worked great, but that's not allowed in this comparison. This is about raw performance. And in terms of value, that means that the T600 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.16. Compare that to the RX 6400. Running the same benchmark in the same settings, it got an average of 43 FPS, which comes out to 0.23 FPS per dollar. Again, I'd opt to use FSR upscaling if I was playing this game on this card, but the RX 6400 did much better at native 1080p than the T600. 43% better in fact. That's pretty big. I was expecting the RX 6400 to do better, not by this much, which is a nice surprise if you ask me. You know, the T600 is a good GPU. It was the best we could get for the price a few months ago, but it's nice to have some more competition in the low-end GPU space at long last. But we always need to test out Cyberpunk 2077, don't we? The most demanding game, like, ever, I think. The T600 never did well in Cyberpunk in my past tests. Today I'm running at 1080p, low settings, and the T600 got an average of 21 FPS. That's not great. not really playable. It's Cyberpunk, so we're used to needing some serious use of like FSR and running at lower resolutions, just to get it playable. 21 FPS means that the T600 gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.11. And the RX 6400, well, it didn't do great either, to be honest. It came out with an average of 28 FPS, which is still borderline unplayable, in my opinion. And again, I use FSR or RSR to upscale this to get more performance, but it did do better than the T600. 28 FPS means 0.15 FPS per dollar, which is 37% better than the T600. So even though both weren't really playable, the RX 6400 was the less unplayable of the two. So if it's not clear by this point, yeah, the RX 6400 is a much more capable gaming GPU than the T600. After we average everything out across all of our games, the T600 comes out with an average of 46 FPS. And at $185, that means that it ultimately gets an FPS per dollar value of 0.25. And then along comes the RX 6400 with a 5-game average of 62 FPS, which means that it has an average FPS per dollar value of 0.33. That's a pretty big difference. It's a 32% difference actually. The RX 6400 at these prices is at a 32% better value than the T600. This was super surprising. I wasn't expecting the RX 6400 to do this well going into the test. In my previous GPU SmackDown, the T600 beat out the 1650 and the 1050 Ti. It was basically the king of the budget GPU space for like the last year, but now there's a new king in town. You can't have two kings. Congratulations, RX 6400, you did it.
Yay!
But wait, we're not done here. We're forgetting something, aren't we? The PCIe 4.0 versus 3.0 issue. Real quick, if you're not aware, the RX 6400 only has 4 PCIe lanes, which means that it suffers from reduced bandwidth potential on PCIe 3.0 systems. The difference in performance depends on the game. Some games do better than others, but let's do another final comparison with the PCIe 3.0 handicap on the RX 6400. In the data that I've seen, on average, the RX 6400 takes about a 15% performance hit when running on PCIe 3.0 compared to 4.0. So let's take away 15% of the FPS on our conclusion and see how it does. Again, T600, 46 FPS average and an FPS per dollar value of 0.25. The RX 6400 loses 15% of its FPS and ends up not with 62 FPS but with 52 FPS. And that comes out to 0.28 FPS per dollar, which is still 12% better than the T600. So even here, even in a worst case scenario, with the RX 6400 being run on a PCIe Gen 3.0 system, it still comes out ahead. Not by that much. 12% isn't nearly as massive a difference compared to 32%, but it's still pretty clear that the RX 6400 is the better value GPU in terms of gaming performance no matter how you look at it. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there is still a case to be made for the T600. Keep in mind that the T600 is a workstation GPU. It has built-in encoding and decoding, so it can handle recording your gameplay, or recording anything on your PC for that matter, and it can handle all the video decoding you can need, which will become a bigger deal once AV1 encoding takes over as it's supposed to. It has the NVIDIA Studio drivers, which are better for compatibility in desktop applications, and it has 4 freaking DisplayPort connections, so you can run a workstation with 4 displays, which is what freaks like me do, and you can game on it. It's a great GPU. It was a better value for gaming a few months ago, but out with the old and in with the new. This always happens with PC hardware though. You know, something that was awesome a year ago is now less awesome compared to the new thing. We should be used to that at this point, right? If you don't care about encoding for recording your gameplay, and you don't care about using more than 2 displays, and all you want is the best bang for the buck gaming performance, well the answer is clear. The RX 6400 is the one you want, and the low profile version is just as versatile as the T600 was. You know, you can slap this in any PC, even the small form factor office PCs like the Dell Optiplex, and get yourself a great little budget gaming PC at a great price. Actually, I'm going to be making a video doing that, so get subscribed so you don't miss it. And that brings us to the end. I'm super curious to know what you guys think. Have you been holding out for an RX 6400? Thinking of picking one up? Do you have one? Are you happy with it? What about you T600 owners? Do you feel disappointed that there's a new kid on the block? Or are you still happy with your T600 and its extra features? I'm still happy that I have mine. And I'm happy that the RX 6400 is finally here too. I'm always happy when the budget end of the GPU spectrum gets some new offerings. But, leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you down there. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you like the video. or the thumbs down button if you hated it. Subscribe, because that's what all the cool kids are doing. As always, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.